What if the world's most infamous terrorist attack, the one that reshaped geopolitics, launched endless wars, and altered civil liberties forever, wasn't terrorism at all? What if it was the most precisely orchestrated false flag operation in modern history? What if everything, from the victims to the villains to the evidence, was carefully chosen, not by extremists in caves, but by people in power? Let's follow the trail, step by step, and see where it leads. It begins like any other day, blue skies over New York, but deep inside the cockpit of American Airlines Flight 11 sits a Vietnamese-American pilot, a man who once served during the Vietnam War, a war the U.S. waged, devastated, and left smoldering, a war that never ended in his mind. Seated right behind him, an elite Israeli military officer, not a random passenger, a placement. A shadow watching the flight, positioned perfectly for something no one would expect. In the cabin, Amy Sweeney, a flight attendant, reportedly makes a 13-minute phone call describing hijackers by name, giving seat numbers, even describing weapons. But stop and think. How did a phone call like that happen in 2001 from 30,000 feet, when mobile signal was virtually impossible at that altitude? How could she provide real-time identification of people she had never met? And if the hijackers had already taken control, how did she talk for so long without being silenced, especially when other passengers were supposedly killed instantly? What if the call never happened? Across the Hudson River, 5 men are seen dancing on a rooftop, cameras pointed at the Twin Towers before the first plane hit. They cheer, they smile, they celebrate. Who were they? Israeli nationals, later detained by the FBI, but instead of being interrogated and tried, they were quietly flown back to Israel, protected by a government that called them tourists. And that's not all. Just 6 weeks before 9/11, Larry Silverstein signs a lease for the World Trade Center and insists on a clause that would maximize insurance claims in the event of a terrorist attack. Coincidence? Even more curiously, Tower 7, which was never hit by a plane, collapsed straight down at freefall speed, just like a controlled demolition. How? No jet fuel, no impact, yet a symmetrical collapse. The official reason, office fires. But ask any structural engineer, office fires don't cause steel skyscrapers to implode unless someone rigged it from the inside. What if we were conditioned to accept 9/11s long before it ever happened? Flip through pop culture, cartoons like The Simpsons, films like The Matrix, even an old promotional poster for the Lone Gunman, all with eerie hints about planes hitting towers, the numbers 9/11s, or attacks in New York. Is it coincidence? Or were we being groomed to accept the narrative? Now let's talk evidence. Steel beams melted, but a paper passport survived? No bodies intact, but a perfectly preserved passport of one alleged hijacker floats down to the street? Even more shocking, phones were destroyed, flight recorders burned, yet somehow we have detailed conversations from flight attendants, passenger voicemails, and even the name of a hijacker who allegedly stabbed Daniel Lewin, despite there being no survivors. How could anyone know who stabbed whom, unless the story was written in advance? In the months before 9/11, President George W. Bush gave a speech referencing the need for America to project global military power, but he warned that Americans wouldn't support such ambitions unless a catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor occurred. And then 9/11s happened. What followed? Invasion of Afghanistan, within weeks invasion of Iraq, based on false WMD claims, regime changes across the Middle East. Billions in defense contracts, new U.S. military bases built around Israel's regional adversaries. Who benefited? Israel, whose hostile neighbors were destabilized U.S. defense contractors. Who made billions? Oil companies who gained access to key regions. Private intelligence firms who expanded surveillance and control. And the companies that reaped the most? Most were funded and controlled by a few massive financial institutions, many with strong pro-Israel lobbies, Zionist affiliations, and deep ties to U.S. politics. Even Osama bin Laden, a former CIA asset, initially denied involvement. But a grainy tape surfaced later with a bearded figure who didn't quite look like him suddenly claiming responsibility. The narrative was sealed. The wars began. What if 9/11 was not an attack from the outside, but a calculated strategy from within? What if it was a joint intelligence operation designed to justify global military expansion, frame Muslims and Arabs as permanent enemies, protect Israel's dominance in the Middle East, and enrich a global elite who profit from chaos? What if everything, from the dancing men, to the fake calls, to the insurance, to the passport, was part of the script? A masterclass in mass manipulation. A play where 3,000 people were sacrificed for a lie. Would you still believe the story? Or would you dare to ask the question, what if 9/11 was the world's most successful inside job, and we were all just players in the audience?